Mike Swenson here with REL Freedom, and today we're talking about picking successful investment strategies based on your goals. So if you're somebody that's looking into getting into investing and don't necessarily know where to start, stick around and we'll have some great tips for you. If you talk to anybody that's been in real estate for a while and you ask them about investing, chances are most of the time they've at least thought about investing or have considered getting into investing, or they're saving up to start investing. The number of people that have actually done investing themselves is much smaller. And so for a lot of people, it's because there's some barriers out there. Some people just don't know where to start. Some people don't necessarily know what to do financially to make that happen. Some people don't know the strategy that it takes to do that. And for a lot of folks, it's just the risk, leaping in and starting out. And you don't get to where you want to go without starting somewhere. And so what I want to cover today is just a few things that you guys can do to help move the ball forward to get started with investing. One of the first things that you want to do when you're considered investing is identify what your buy box is. So you'll hear the term buy box thrown out a lot of times with investors or large iBuyers that are out there that are buying properties at a large scale. And what it is that buy box is essentially the set of parameters that you're going to have when you leap into a deal. So certain things that you want to consider is, what type of property do I want? Do I want to start with a single family home? Do I want to start with multifamily? Do I want to do a townhouse or a condo? And so the type of property makes a big difference, because what happens is it really affects what your maintenance is going to be, what your time requirement, what your money requirement is going to be for the home. So if I have a single family home, who's going to mow the lawn? Who's going to shovel the snow? Who's going to do some of that basic maintenance stuff? And it might be you if you're starting out. It might be a property management company. But what happens with that really makes a big difference on if you want to take on the time hassle and the money hassle with that. If you've got a multi-family property, let's just say a duplex, you've got 2 tenants in there. Now you've got a lawn to still worry about, but it's only one lawn, so you'd have to only go there once if you're going to mow it, versus 2 separate properties where you'd have to mow 2 separate lawns. Or you could potentially have the tenants do that. Another consideration is if you're looking at buying a townhouse or a condo, chances are a lot of that stuff's rolled into the association. So you don't have the time requirement. You do have the money requirement if you're paying the association dues, unless you pass those dues on to your tenant. So all things to consider: the time investment, the money investment, and what that looks like. So that's why the type of property is really going to make a big difference as you start to identify your buy box. Another thing that you want to consider is, where's the property located? You may not live close to an area where there's great deals to be had for flipping or for renting. And so you might have to look outside your current area to find those spots. Or you may happen to live in a good spot. Personally, a house that we considered purchasing, one of the parameters that I had is it needed to be convenient for me to be able to go there. So what happened was, and I was going to spend some time working on fixing it up. And so what I did is I looked at where I worked at the time, where I lived at the time, and the path that I drove each day to get to and from work. And I wanted something that was close, within a few blocks of my path each day for driving. And so the reason behind that was, if I was driving home from work and I was going to spend a couple hours working on the property, I could, and it wasn't inconvenient for me or for my wife to be able to be away from home as I'm working on that property. Same thing if I had renters then, and something came up and I needed to swing by, it was always convenient for me. I was either popping by before work or after work because it was on my way there. So that's where location makes a big difference. So you could choose to pick an area that's not far from where you live, which is convenient, or you may pick an area that is really fruitful and it's a long ways away. Just understand that if you're going to have to physically be driving there, that's extra time on you. So identifying that location is super important, because it's really going to dictate how much time are you spending away from home and how much drive time are you spending. So that's why location is really important. Another obvious thing with the buy box is, what can you afford? How much can I afford to go up to? Talking with your lender and finding out what the parameters are on a rental property if you're going to hold it for a while is really important. So understanding what their boxes of where they're going to approve you for a mortgage if you're going to get a mortgage or financing. That's important to understand too. So if they're going to approve you up to a certain dollar amount, that's probably your buy box for right now, and that can change over time. So obviously the price is important. You don't want to overstretch yourself on your first rental property because you don't know what's going to happen yet, and you're not a savvy investor yet. You're going to be in the future, so you want to identify, what's a safe step for me to take into the water of getting a rental property. And so establishing that top price that you're comfortable with, and then you're going to have to look at what a home sell for, both in the condition you're looking to buy it for, the condition you're looking to potentially sell it for after you fix it up. You're going to want to look at what rents are out there, so you can go to rental websites and find out what the rents are. So all those things are going to help you establish financially what you want to get out of it. If you're going to buy and flip it, you want to know what's the purchase price I'm looking at, what's the sales price I'm looking at, and what are those repair costs. If you're looking at holding it, what's the rent each month? How much can I charge? What's my mortgage and my expenses going to be? And what am I going to net from that? So that's where the price obviously plays a big deal into your buy box as well. Knowing the answers to all these questions is really important for having a nice tight buy box, because what you don't want to have happen is, if you don't have something well established, you're going to spend so much time researching and chasing deals all over the map. You might be, if you're in a metro area, you might be looking at this spot of the metro area and this spot and this spot and this spot, and you're going all over the place and you're spending all your time focusing on deals, and you're probably just a little bit behind on all of them. So establishing a nice tight buy box will make you feel comfortable when you're ready to take the leap, and it'll make you feel a lot more confident as well, because you understand the parameters, you know what's a fit for you, you know what's going to excite you, and what's going to be a fit for you and your family. So having a well-established buy box ahead of time is really going to help you know when to be able to make the leap, and it's less of an emotional decision because you've taken your time to do your research up front, and now it's just, does it fit or not? Yes, okay, I'm going to jump in. And so that can really help you get over the hurdle of getting into your first investment property. Another thing that you want to consider is, what's your long-term strategy here? You can buy a property and flip it. You can get a nice cash inflow right away if you flip that property. You can buy and hold for a short period of time. You can buy and hold for a long period of time. And so each of those strategies comes with a different set of circumstances that you want to analyze. And a great example for this is I was actually listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast, and episode 398 is a great episode. And in it, Tarl Yarber, who's an investor, talks about his strategy. And when he first started out, he was doing heavy flips. His logic was always, if I can flip a house for $50,000, why would I want to buy and hold it? And let's just say he was netting $1,000 a month on a buy and hold. Well, that's going to take 50 months for him to get his money back over 4 years. So his thought was, if I flip it for $50K now, I don't have to wait 4.5 years or wait for over 4 years to get my money back to be able to make that same amount. And what was happening for him is he was getting burnt out. Chasing the cash, chasing the flip got to be a big hassle. It was a big stressor on him. The margins started to tighten up as he was hiring out additional labor, and it wasn't a very scalable business, both scalable up as things were good and scalable down as things weren't as good. And so he found himself in a really tough circumstance where he actually thought about throwing in the towel and getting out of the business. And when he and his wife started to take a look at buy and hold strategy using the Bur Method, they realized that, yeah, not only do I get a few $100s each month in profit off of the rent based on, the rent that they're charging versus the mortgage or the financing that they're paying out on, but they're also getting depreciation. They're also getting some tax advantages from that. And then they're also getting principal reduction on the financing that they have. So what on the surface appears like, $500 or $1,000 a month actually turned out to be a lot more. And then they realized too that if they held it, worst case scenario, if something went wrong, they could always sell it and make that $50,000 that they initially were going to make at the beginning. And over time, as appreciation happens and your principal goes down, they could actually net a lot more than that. And so then in addition to that, you now have properties that you're holding in a portfolio that's growing more and more over time. And so you kind of get that hockey stick growth where what starts out really small starts to get really big later. And so in that episode 398, he shares about that strategy and how it really was a great fit for him and his family long term. It helped him to live the life that he wants to live. So in my mind, that's a great real life example of, you know, your short-term strategy and your long-term strategy, and ultimately the goals that you want in your life, and does that align? So you're going to want to take a look at that. You know, buying your first property isn't going to dictate what happens with the rest of your life, but you at least want to know where you're at and know what goals you want to accomplish so that that first property can fit within your future goals versus going against it. And so that's where really taking a long look at your short-term strategy and your long-term strategy is going to make a big difference when you're getting ready to make that investment. Another thing for you to consider is now the right time for you to take that risk? And do you have enough of a financial runway if things do go sideways? So we know that there's a lot of great investment properties to be had, and there's a lot of great success stories, and yet there's also stories where things don't go as well as you planned. So there might be additional repair costs, there might be things that you didn't know about on the property that pop up. It might be that once you fix it up, you can't actually get the rent that you thought you could get for it. And so what you want to make sure that you have, especially when making that first leap, is do you have enough of a financial runway to recover if something goes sideways? What you don't want to have happen is you've thought about investing, you're considering investing, and now you finally make the leap and something goes wrong, and now you're put in a hole that's going to take so long to work out of that you're scared to invest again. And so look at, as you're analyzing the property that you're looking to purchase, look at the best case scenario and also look at kind of the alternative scenario where if some things go wrong, and have a plan for that, how you're going to recover, you know, what's kind of your exit strategy if things start to go sideways, so that your first investment property doesn't derail you from being able to have other investment properties. And so knowing that right time is really important for you, and you're going to have to make a risk at some point. And so making sure that you have that first property be successful, or as successful as possible, is really important in your strategy as well. And another one of our great tips here is you want to look at what future reward am I giving up if I don't take the risk today. So each decision that you make has an impact in the future, and everybody wants to hold investments and have investments, but as we talked about before, what happens is people don't make that risk. They don't make that leap, and it's because they're probably just not comfortable with making that leap. So you have to look at what is that big why, what's the big reason why you're doing this to begin with, and if I don't make the leap now, what am I giving up in the future? And so if your goal is to have X amount of properties, X amount of value of your investment properties, you're not going to get there unless you make the leap. And so sometimes it's helpful to remind ourselves, what is future me going to have as a reward? And that's going to help me kind of push me in the water to make that leap. So if you think about, you know, maybe as a child, as you're standing on the edge of the pool and you don't want to dive in, you're scared, you know, of what could go wrong. It's just like that before you're taking this kind of risk. And so reminding yourself of the reward of going swimming and all the fun that it can be helps you to make that dive into the water. And so that's what you're going to ultimately have to do here. So remind yourself of that why. Remind yourself of what future you is going to look like when you do make that risk, and give yourself grace. You know, you're not going to be a master investor with your first property, and yet you have to go through your first property to become a master investor. So that's where starting is really important, and through all those other tips that we talked about, it's going to help you decide the right time and the right spot to jump in, so that you can get your feet wet, you can learn, you can grow, and you can move forward. So you know, there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about in terms of investing. We're going to cover this in future videos, and yet we wanted to get started with something today. So let us know if you have any thoughts or comments, anything that we can help with. Check out our website, realfreedom.com. Go check out our Facebook community. We've got a link for that as well, and get connected with other people so that we can go get some real freedom together. Thanks.